You're probably making a silver decision right now that feels safe, logical, even responsible. And that's exactly why it's dangerous. Not because silver itself is bad, but because the way most people think about silver is quietly wrong. If you own silver, are planning to buy silver, or believe you understand silver, this matters to you more than you think. The mistake isn't obvious, it doesn't feel reckless, it doesn't feel greedy, it feels reasonable, it feels like common sense. And common sense is often where the biggest financial blind spots hide. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't actually understand what they own when they say they own silver. They think they do. They've read articles, they've watched videos, they've seen charts. They've heard phrases repeated so often they feel like facts. Silver is undervalued. Silver always catches up. Silver is insurance. Silver can't fail. Those ideas sound calm. They sound conservative. They sound intelligent. But they are incomplete. And incomplete ideas are dangerous, especially when you trust them. The real problem isn't silver. The problem is the story you're telling yourself about silver. Right now, you probably believe silver is simple. You buy it, you wait, and eventually something breaks in the system. Inflation, debt, the dollar, confidence. And when that happens, silver rises. History proves it. Charts confirm it. Logic supports it. That belief makes silver feel passive, like a seatbelt, like something you put on and forget about. You don't need to think too deeply. You don't need to monitor it closely. You don't need to question it. You just need patience. And that's where the mistake begins, because silver is not passive, it's not quiet, and it's not patient in the way people assume. Silver behaves very differently depending on where you stand, how you hold it, and what you expect it to do. Most people think silver is slow. They think risk only exists if the price goes down. They think danger means loss on a chart, red numbers, temporary drops, volatility. But the real risk with silver isn't obvious on a price chart. It's structural, it's psychological, and it builds while nothing seems to be happening. Think about this for a moment. If silver were as simple as people believe, if it were truly just buy and wait, then everyone who bought it over the last decade would feel confident right now. Calm, secure, certain. But many don't. They feel confused. They feel frustrated. They feel like they're missing something they can't quite explain. Silver hasn't behaved the way the story promised it would. Not consistently, not cleanly, not in a way that rewards patience the way people were told patience would be rewarded. So what do people do? They adjust the timeline. They change the explanation. They say, not yet. And each time they say that, the belief feels safer, familiar, comfortable. But familiarity is not safety. The uncomfortable question most silver buyers avoid asking is this: what if the risk isn't that silver fails, but that your expectations are wrong? What if the danger isn't price suppression, manipulation, or delay, but misunderstanding? Because misunderstanding doesn't feel threatening. It feels normal. It feels like you're informed. It feels like you're part of the group that gets it. And that's exactly why it persists. Most mistakes in finance don't come from panic. They come from calm confidence built on assumptions that were never fully examined. Silver attracts people who want stability, people who want something real, something solid, something outside the system. That instinct isn't foolish, it's human. But when a desire for safety turns into unquestioned belief, it creates blind spots. And blind spots don't announce themselves, they wait. Right now, there's a gap between what most people think silver is and what silver actually does in the real world. That gap isn't dramatic. It doesn't make headlines. It doesn't trend on social media, but it matters. Because when conditions change, that gap doesn't close gently. It snaps. And when it snaps, the people who misunderstood silver won't feel like they made a mistake at first. They'll feel surprised, confused, maybe even betrayed. In the next part, we're going to look at what most silver buyers believe, why it feels logical, and why that logic is so convincing. Not to attack it, not to dismiss it, but to understand how something that feels so reasonable can quietly lead people into the wrong conclusions. Most people who buy silver aren't acting on impulse. They're not chasing hype. They're not trying to get rich overnight. In fact, many of them would describe themselves as cautious, thoughtful, even skeptical of financial trends. And that's why the common silver belief system feels so solid. It usually starts with a simple observation. Money doesn't feel stable anymore. Prices rise, savings lose value, debt keeps growing, and trust in institutions feels thinner than it used to. When you notice that, silver appears as a rational response. It has history. It has physical form. It isn't dependent on a promise or a screen. That logic makes sense. Silver has been money before. It's used in industry. It can't be printed. It doesn't default. It doesn't go to zero. Compared to complex financial products, silver feels honest. From there, the belief builds step by step. You hear that silver is undervalued compared to gold, that the ratio is stretched, that eventually it has to correct. You see charts showing past spikes. You're told that manipulation holds it down artificially, that one day the pressure releases. This explanation feels comforting because it turns frustration into patience. If silver isn't rising, it's not because the idea is wrong, it's because the system is unfair, and unfair systems eventually break. So waiting becomes a virtue. Then comes the insurance argument. Silver isn't about making money, it's about protection. It's about owning something real in case things go wrong. That framing lowers expectations. You're not supposed to care about short-term price moves. You're supposed to hold it quietly, just in case. That sounds responsible. You're also told that silver is different from other assets. Stocks can crash, bonds can fail, currencies can be devalued, but silver will always be silver. Even if the price fluctuates, the metal itself remains. That idea creates emotional distance from risk. If you believe something cannot truly fail, you stop questioning it deeply. You stop asking how, when, and under what conditions it works. Another part of the belief is comparison. Silver is cheap per ounce compared to gold. That makes it feel accessible. It feels like the people's metal. You can hold more of it. You can touch it. You can stack it. That physical interaction reinforces confidence. You're not just owning an asset. You're owning weight, density, substance. And then there's community reinforcement. When you hear the same explanations repeated by different voices, the belief feels stronger. The language becomes familiar. The phrases become shorthand. Anyone who questions the narrative sounds impatient, uninformed, or weak-handed. So skepticism fades. All of this creates a picture of silver as something steady, misunderstood by the mainstream, and destined to be proven right over time. It's a story where delay equals validation, where frustration is evidence, not warning. And again, the problem isn't that these ideas are entirely wrong. The problem is that they feel complete when they're not. What most silver buyers believe is internally consistent. Each part supports the others. Undervaluation explains underperformance. Manipulation explains delay. History explains confidence. Physical ownership explains safety. It all fits together neatly. But neat stories can hide messy realities. Very few people stop to ask deeper questions. Not because they're careless, but because the surface explanation already feels sufficient. Why dig further if the logic already makes sense? Why question something designed to protect you? This is where belief quietly turns into assumption. Most people assume that time is always on their side, that holding longer automatically reduces risk, that the longer silver stays suppressed, the more explosive the eventual move must be. But markets don't work on fairness. They work on structure, incentives, behavior, and changing conditions. Silver doesn't exist in isolation. It exists inside systems that evolve. Supply chains change, demand changes, financial plumbing changes, rules change, and expectations change faster than most people realize. When your belief is built on how something should behave rather than how it actually behaves under stress, you're relying on logic instead of observation. And logic can feel very convincing right up until it isn't. In the next part, we're going to look at the quiet risk that almost no one talks about. Not a dramatic collapse, not a sudden ban, not a headline event. A slow, subtle risk that grows specifically because the common silver story feels so reasonable. It's the kind of risk that doesn't scare people away. It keeps them comfortable, and that's what makes it dangerous. The quiet risk with silver isn't that it goes to zero. That idea is easy to dismiss, so most people never worry about it. The real risk is more subtle, and that's why it slips past almost everyone. It's the risk of being right about silver, but wrong about how that truth actually shows up in your life. Most people think risk means loss, losing money. Seeing red numbers, watching price drop below where you bought. That's visible risk. It feels obvious. And because silver doesn't feel fragile, people assume that kind of risk is limited. But there is another kind of risk, one that doesn't show up on a chart, and one that doesn't announce itself with volatility. It's the risk of mismatch. Mismatch between expectation and reality. Mismatch between ownership and access. Mismatch between what you think protection looks like and how protection actually functions when conditions change. Silver sits in a strange position. It's treated like money, traded like a commodity, and held like insurance. Those roles overlap, but they are not the same. And problems arise when people blur them together. If you believe silver is insurance, you assume it's there when you need it. If you believe it's undervalued, you assume time works in your favor. If you believe it's outside the system, you assume it's insulated from the system's failures. Each assumption feels reasonable on its own. Together, they create a blind spot. Because silver doesn't protect you automatically. It doesn't respond to stress in a single predictable way. It behaves differently depending on timing, location, form, and demand, and those differences matter far more than most people realize. One of the least discussed risks is liquidity under pressure. People assume silver is always sellable, that there will always be a buyer, that price equals access. But those are normal condition assumptions. Under stress, markets don't behave politely. Liquidity doesn't disappear evenly. It disappears where it's needed most. Spreads widen, buyers hesitate, rules tighten, middlemen protect themselves first. What looked like a simple transaction becomes conditional. Another quiet risk is delay. Not delay in price appreciation, but delay in usefulness. People imagine silver stepping in smoothly when something goes wrong. But real-world disruptions are rarely smooth. They're messy. They involve confusion, restrictions, and sudden changes in behavior. In those moments, the value of silver isn't theoretical. It's practical. And practicality depends on more than belief. Then there's the psychological risk. Silver attracts conviction. Conviction feels like strength, but it can harden into rigidity. When someone believes deeply that silver must work, they stop reevaluating. They stop adapting. They stop noticing subtle shifts that don't fit the narrative. That's dangerous because systems don't break all at once. They bend first. They reroute. They create exceptions. They change incentives. Silver can rise in price and still fail to meet expectations. It can hold value and still disappoint. It can be scarce and still behave in ways people didn't anticipate. And when that happens, the problem isn't silver. It's that people were prepared for the wrong version of success. Another overlooked risk is concentration. Not concentration in silver itself, but concentration in a single idea of how silver works. When people lock onto one outcome, they stop planning for alternatives. They stop asking, what if this plays out differently? What if silver rises slowly instead of explosively? What if access matters more than price? What if the system adapts instead of collapses? What if protection looks less dramatic than expected? These aren't pessimistic questions. They're practical ones, but they're rarely asked because the dominant silver story already feels complete. And that's the core issue. The danger isn't that people misunderstand silver's potential. It's that they underestimate its complexity. They treat it like a fixed answer to a moving problem. Silver isn't a switch that flips when things go wrong. It's part of a process. And processes are shaped by behavior, rules, and timing. When you don't understand that, you can hold silver for the right reasons and still feel unprepared when reality doesn't match the story you were told. In the next part, we're going to bring all of this together, not to give answers, not to offer solutions, but to look at silver more honestly, without the comfort of simple narratives. Because understanding the risk isn't about fear. It's about clarity. And clarity is the one thing most silver conversations avoid. The silver mistake nobody realizes they're making isn't buying silver. It's assuming silver removes the need to think. When you strip away the stories, the slogans, and the recycled explanations, what you're left with is something far more uncomfortable. Silver doesn't replace judgment. It doesn't replace awareness. And it doesn't replace responsibility for understanding how the world actually works as it changes. Most people want silver to be an answer. A final step, something they can do once and feel finished. Buy it, store it, forget it. Let time do the work. But silver was never meant to be an ending. It's a tool. And tools only work when you understand how and when to use them. The misunderstanding becomes dangerous when people confuse belief with preparedness. Belief feels strong. It feels steady. Preparedness is quieter. It requires flexibility. It requires admitting uncertainty. And it requires revisiting assumptions instead of defending them. Many silver holders don't revisit their assumptions. They defend them. Every new event is filtered through the same explanation. Every disappointment becomes proof of future success. Every delay becomes validation. That mindset feels comforting, but it removes feedback. And without feedback, you stop learning. The real risk with silver is not loss, it's rigidity. It's being so confident in one outcome that you're unprepared for any other. It's assuming that if you're right about the problem, you must also be right about the solution. History doesn't work that way. Financial stress doesn't unfold cleanly. Systems adapt. Authorities respond. Rules change. Markets reroute pressure instead of releasing it all at once. And assets behave differently depending on who needs what and when. Silver sits inside all of that, not above it. That doesn't make silver weak. It makes it real. Real things don't follow scripts. They respond to conditions. When people say silver is insurance, what they often mean is comfort. Something solid they can point to when the world feels unstable. The comfort isn't wrong, but comfort is not the same as readiness. Readiness asks harder questions. What exactly do you expect silver to do for you? When do you expect it to matter? In what form? Under what conditions? And compared to what alternatives? These questions don't have dramatic answers. They don't make good headlines. They don't fit into short slogans. But they matter far more than price targets or historical comparisons. The silver mistake is assuming that because silver has worked before, it will work the same way again. That because it's tangible, it's automatically effective. That because it's outside the system, it's unaffected by the system's behavior. Those assumptions feel safe. They are shared widely, and they are rarely challenged. Not because people are ignorant, but because challenging them feels like attacking security itself. But clarity isn't an attack, it's protection. Understanding silver means accepting that it doesn't guarantee outcomes. It offers possibilities. And possibilities come with conditions. If you misunderstand those conditions, silver can still do exactly what it does best, while failing to meet what you expected it to do for you. That's the danger. Not that silver fails, that expectations do. The goal isn't to abandon silver, it's to stop romanticizing it. to stop treating it like a promise and start seeing it as a component in a much larger, more complex reality. Most people never make that shift. They stay inside the familiar story because it feels stable, it feels certain, and certainty feels like safety. But real safety comes from understanding, not belief. If this made you uncomfortable, that's not a bad sign. It means you're thinking instead of repeating, observing instead of assuming. And if you want to continue examining silver without hype, without fear, and without easy answers, staying engaged matters. Because the conversations that matter most are usually the ones that don't offer clean conclusions. They offer better questions. And those questions are worth staying with